There are moments in life that change you in ways you never recover from. Moments where your heart breaks so deeply that even the quiet feels sharp. For me, that moment arrived on a mild Wednesday afternoon when I woke from a short nap and realized someone had cut my hair without asking. My name is Maria Lane. I'm 56 years old, and what I'm about to share is something I never believed would happen to me. The light drifting through my bedroom curtains had a faint bluish tint. Late daylight, not warm morning sunlight. I had slept barely 40 minutes. I was tired from the morning because, like most midweek afternoons, I had prepared a full chicken stew with roasted vegetables for my family. Daniel and his wife Sophie lived with me in the house Henry and I bought decades ago. A quiet place tucked in a small neighborhood in Westwood with a backyard, pale orange marigolds, and the faint smell of old pine wood soaked into the walls. When I opened my eyes, something felt wrong. My head felt lighter, unfamiliar. I reached up to touch my hair and it wasn't there. Well, it was, but not the way it should have been. The long hair I had cared for over 30 years, the hair that once brushed the middle of my back, was now chopped off. Jagged, uneven, done in a hurry. I shot out of bed, my heart pounding so hard my knees trembled. I rushed into the bathroom and the mirror confirmed what my fingers already knew. My hair, the hair I brushed every morning with a dab of jasmine oil, had been destroyed. I stumbled out of the room shaking. Daniel and Sophie were in the den, not the living room. The television was on, some cooking show humming in the background. Sophie was smiling, a smile I still see in my nightmares. What happened to my hair? I asked, my voice hardly steady. Sophie crossed her legs and said with that coldness I had grown used to, "That's how you learn where you stand." I froze. I looked at my son, my Daniel, the child I once carried through thunderstorms, the boy who used to press his cheek to my shoulder, the young man whose hand I squeezed the night his father passed away. "Mom, you're overreacting," he said without looking directly at me. "You're too old to keep your hair that long. It made you look stuck in another time." Sophie was trying to help. Help. A word that cut deeper than the scissors ever could. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. I turned away and walked back to my bedroom. I closed the door and stood in front of the mirror, staring at the hacked-up pieces sticking out near my shoulders. And then, without meaning to, I opened the small drawer of my bedside table, the place where Henry kept a tiny velvet box containing his father's silver pocket watch. The drawer was too light. The box was gone. For a moment I thought maybe I moved it, maybe I reorganized something. But no, I remembered the last night I held it. Henry had given me that watch the first month we were married. "Keep it close," he told me. "It's the only thing my father left me." I had kept it beside me every night since. Now it was missing. A deeper cold washed over me. The haircut had been one thing, humiliating, violating, but this was different. This was theft. This was intrusion into something sacred. I went back to the den, my breath unsteady. "My watch," I said. "Henry's watch. It's gone." Daniel finally looked at me, irritated. "What watch?" "The watch your father left me, the silver one." Sophie sighed dramatically. "Maria, honestly, you misplace things all the time. It's probably under a pillow or something." "You were in my room," I said quietly. She smirked. "You sleep weirdly sometimes. Maybe you moved it." "You cut my hair while I slept," I said. "You entered my room without permission. That's how you learn your place," she repeated, as if the phrase delighted her. I looked at Daniel and waited for him to step between us like a son should. He didn't. He ran a hand through his hair and said, "Mum, please. You're being too sensitive." It felt like my ribs tightened around my lungs. I left the house. I didn't take my car. I didn't want to fumble for my keys. I walked down the block until I found a rideshare waiting at the curb and asked to be taken to the small salon I'd gone to for years. the one where Marta always greeted me as if I mattered. When she saw me through the mirror, she gasped, "Oh, Maria, who did that to you?" I sat down and I cried. I cried so hard the words tangled. She held my hands and didn't ask for details until I could breathe again. "I can't undo all of it," she said softly as she washed my hair with warm water infused with chamomile. "But we'll make it look how it should." The scent calmed me. My scalp stung from uneven cuts, but Marta's hands were gentle. I told her about the missing watch, the hair, the words Sophie had spoken. She stopped cutting for a moment and leaned close. "Maria, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is control. And if you don't take your power back, they will keep taking pieces of you." Her words echoed inside me the entire drive home. When I returned, the house felt staged, like the people inside it were reading from a script they wrote without me. I went straight to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. I took out the manila envelope where I kept important paper. The house deed, bank files, Henry's older letters. The deed was in my name alone. The house, every tile, every beam, every memory woven into it was mine. I looked at the monthly transfers I'd been making to Daniel, $1,600 a month. At first I hadn't felt it. Henry had left me enough to manage. But now I felt every dollar like a bruise. They spent it freely, without gratitude, without responsibility. That night I lay awake. The marigolds outside brushed against the window with the wind. My room smelt faintly of jasmine oil and chamomile from the salon. I thought of Henry's watch, the empty drawer, the uneven hair. I thought of Daniel's indifferent stare. I told myself I would wait 4 days, not 3, 4 small days to see if Daniel would come to me, not with excuses but with remorse. On the 4th day, I woke before sunrise. The sky outside was pale grey, the kind of colour that makes everything feel suspended. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of mint tea. The marigolds were glowing faintly in the early light. I knew what I had to do. I called Mr. Hammond, Henry's old lawyer. "Maria," he said gently, "come by tomorrow morning, we'll take care of this." When I hung up, my hands felt steady in a way they hadn't felt in months. The silence in the house was different now. It didn't feel oppressive. It felt like space I had finally remembered belonged to me. Before I explain what happened next, I need you to understand who I was before that Wednesday afternoon, before the haircut, before the missing watch, before I began waking up to the life I'd allowed to form around me. My full name is Maria Lane. I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town that smelled of wet concrete after every rainfall. My parents ran a fabric shop off a narrow street that always seemed too crowded for the size of the town. My father sold rolls of cotton, linen, and silk stacked so high they looked like colorful towers. As a child, I loved touching everything, the smooth silk, the textured linen, but my father always told me the same thing: "Maria, valuable things must be handled gently, and valued things must be protected." I didn't understand what he meant until much later in life. When I was 24, I met Henry Lane at a late summer community fair. He was 33, quiet, the kind of man who didn't speak often, but when he did, every word mattered. He worked as a structural engineer, careful, methodical, steady. He never rushed anything. Not work, not decisions, not love. When he held my hand for the first time, it felt like he had measured the gesture exactly, making sure it meant something. We married 8 months later beneath an archway decorated with white chrysanthemums and eucalyptus branches, flowers Henry chose because he said they reminded him of calm. And for many years our home was calm too. A tiny apartment at first, then a slightly larger one, and finally the Westwood house. We bought it when Daniel was a year old, a 2-story place with cracked tiles on the porch and tall, uneven hedges that Henry promised to trim but never quite did. I planted marigolds in the backyard because my mother used to grow them outside our shop. Henry added a small garden bed of mint and parsley, and Daniel learned to walk on the patchy grass behind the house. Henry had a habit of leaving small folded notes around the house. They would appear in coat pockets, under cups, between the pages of recipe books. Sometimes they were simple. Remember, the mint needs watering. And sometimes they were things he struggled to say aloud. One note I've kept folded inside an old cookbook reads, "Maria, don't lose yourself in taking care of others. Keep becoming, even when life asks you to bend." I didn't understand that one either, not back then. Daniel was our only child, and we loved him fiercely, maybe too fiercely. We wanted him to grow up feeling supported, secure. Henry believed structure was everything. I believed comfort was everything. Between the two of us, Daniel grew up cushioned on all sides. Looking back, I wonder if that comfort became a shield he never learned to put down. He drifted through college, changing majors once, then twice, finally settling on business administration. He graduated at 24. It couldn't seem to find work that lasted longer than a season. Every job had a flaw. The hours are terrible. The manager doesn't know what he's doing. The pay is insulting. I told myself it was normal. Young adults struggled. They took time to find direction. But Henry saw something else. One winter night, Daniel must have been 27, Henry wrote me a letter during one of his late-night thinking sessions. I didn't read it until after he passed. The ink had bled a little on one corner from tears I didn't realize had touched the page. In it he wrote, "Daniel is good at heart, but he avoids responsibility like I avoided conflict with my father. Don't let him convince you that his lack of direction is your burden to carry." I folded that letter and tucked it into the envelope where I kept our marriage papers. Henry died unexpectedly 6 years ago, a quiet, devastating morning in early spring. One moment he was making coffee, the next he was on the kitchen floor, his breath locked inside him. Daniel wasn't home. I held Henry's hand until the paramedics arrived, but I knew the moment his fingers stilled that he was already gone. The house changed after that. The silence grew heavier, the rooms colder. And in that grief, Daniel moved back in. I didn't hesitate. Of course I wanted my son near me. Of course I wanted a full house again. But then Daniel met Sophie, a woman with a peppermint scent, always dressed in soft pinks and pale greys, always talking loudly about her ideas and her dreams. At first I was drawn to her energy. She reminded me of someone who wanted the world to notice her. And maybe that was the problem. She and Daniel married quickly, too quickly, if I'm being honest. And when they told me they needed somewhere to stay just until we get settled, I didn't even pause. I opened the door, I gave them the guest room. I told them to take their time. I even set up automatic transfers, $1,500 a month, to help them cover expenses until Daniel found stable work. For a while, it felt like a new beginning. Sophie helped cook sometimes. Daniel fixed the loose hinges on the kitchen windows. There were nights we watched movies together, old films Henry used to love. But slowly, so slowly I didn't notice at first, the energy shifted. Sophie began offering suggestions. "Maria, you should try wearing lighter colors. Dark tones age you. Maria, maybe let us handle the shopping. You tend to buy outdated brands. Maria, you still moisturize with that old cream? There are newer ones that work better." Daniel didn't defend me. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes he laughed. Sometimes he didn't say anything at all. But what I noticed most was how Sophie watched me, not with admiration, not with affection, but with calculation. Like she was studying a map she intended to redraw. Still, I convinced myself that things were fine, that families blended in uneven ways, that new marriages brought adjustment periods. But the morning I woke with my hair hacked apart and Henry's watch missing from my drawer, that was when I realized how deeply the balance of our home had been altered and how blind I had been while it shifted. Have you ever ignored small signs only to realize later they were warnings? I wonder that often now. Breaks never arrive all at once. They come in thin hairline fractures, barely visible, almost ignorable, until one day you touch the wall you've leaned on your whole life and feel it give way under your palm. That Wednesday night after the haircut, after the missing watch, after Sophie's cold words lingered in the air like smoke, I stayed in my room. I didn't come down for dinner. I didn't turn on the lamp. I sat beside the window, watching the faint shimmer of passing headlights on the glass. I held a small strand of my hair between my fingers, one long piece that had fallen onto the bed after Sophie's lesson. It was silver near the roots, gold toward the ends. I thought it looked like the timeline of my life. I didn't cry. Not then. Tears require a softness I didn't have in that moment. I woke early the next morning, long before the sky brightened. The air had a cold bite to it, late autumn cold, sharper than usual. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, made myself a cup of ginger tea, and walked downstairs. Sophie was already in the kitchen, wearing an oversized beige sweater and soft pink slippers. She was stirring honey into her tea, my honey, from the jar I'd bought the week before. "Morning, Maria," she said, not looking up. "Good morning," I replied. She examined my hair with a smirk she didn't bother to hide. "It looks better shorter. You actually look lighter." I poured my tea, ignoring her, but my hands trembled slightly, not because of fear or anger, but because of the emptiness her words carved. Daniel came down 10 minutes later, wearing a navy shirt and carrying his phone. "Mum, could you iron this before noon? I'm meeting someone for a networking chat." A networking chat. Not a job interview, not work, not progress. Another circular motion in a life full of circles. "Sure," I said, because anything else would have started a battle I wasn't ready for. He handed me the shirt and kissed me on the cheek as if nothing in the world had shifted the night before. I went to his room, the guest room turned storage room turned bedroom, and began ironing. The collar was wrinkled. The sleeves had faint stains from yesterday's dinner, though he hadn't noticed. While ironing, something glinted beneath the bed frame. I crouched, reached in, and pulled out a small white envelope with the corner torn. There was handwriting on it. Sophie's handwriting. "Mortgage options," asked Daniel. Below it, "Could use house as leverage if Maria cooperates." Cooperates. That word tasted like iron when I mouthed it silently. I placed the envelope back where I found it, not because I wanted to hide what I'd seen, but because I realized then that if I confronted them now, they would twist the truth into something that made me look unreasonable. They were skilled at that. I finished ironing, folded the shirt, and placed it on Daniel's bed. In the living room, I found another sign. A glossy home decor magazine on the coffee table with several pages dog-eared. Modern lofts, minimalist condos, luxury apartment designs. Lines circled in pen. Sophie walked in just as I touched the magazine. "Oh, you found that," she said casually. "Just browsing ideas." Dan and I were talking about renovations. The house needs to feel fresher, more our style. Our style. My house. Henry's house. I closed the magazine slowly. "I see. Oh, don't take it personally." She waved her hand. "We just want to modernize things. And who knows? Maybe a smaller place would suit you better one day." A smaller place. I looked at her, really looked at her. And in her expression, I saw it, calculation. Entitlement. A belief that the world owed her something and I was merely the first step in her ladder upward. Later that afternoon, while reorganizing the drawers in the hallway, I found a crumpled grocery receipt from a store across town, a store I had never been to. The receipt showed a purchase of a $280 skincare kit, a $190 candle, and a bottle of perfume costing more than my weekly groceries, paid with the emergency-only credit card I had given them. I placed the receipt in a small wooden box. The same box where I kept other little reminders of moments that didn't sit right. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I knew that one day I would need to remember every detail clearly. That evening, dinner was quiet. The air felt heavy with unspoken truths. Sophie picked at her plate of roasted cauliflower and barley. Daniel talked about meeting a potential partner for a business idea. "Mum, the guy says he just needs a little capital to get things running," Daniel said. "If you could contribute just a small amount, maybe say $100 or so, it would really help." Sophie nodded eagerly. "It's a great opportunity. We've been researching it all week." I took a slow breath. "I'll think about it." Inside, the answer had already been decided. That night, while they watched a movie in the den, I went upstairs and opened the drawer where Henry's letters were kept. I unfolded the one I had read only once before after he died. "Maria, if the day ever comes when the house feels heavier than comforting, remember, it is your sanctuary first. Do not let anyone make you a guest in your own life." I pressed the letter to my chest. The watch was still missing, my hair was still uneven, but my resolve was beginning to take shape. The next morning, Thursday, I made oatmeal with honey and walnuts, a simple breakfast I used to prepare for Henry on cold days. I placed a bowl in front of Daniel and Sophie without a word. Daniel barely glanced up. Sophie wrinkled her nose. "Carbs again?" I didn't respond, because the decision had already been made, because silence, I realized, can sometimes be the strongest sentence in the room, because the next step, the step that would change everything, was already set in motion. I just had to walk toward it. Thursday had started quietly, but by mid-afternoon the house felt like it was holding its breath. I moved from room to room slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of a strange awareness, as if I were walking through the final pages of a chapter I'd been trapped in for too long. Daniel and Sophie were out. They had left around noon, dressed a little nicer than usual. Daniel wore the navy shirt I had ironed. Sophie had her hair pinned back with a silver clip I had never seen before. When they walked out the door, Sophie called over her shoulder, "We'll be home late, Maria. Don't wait up." I didn't answer. I watched the door close and listened to the sound of the lock clicking back into place. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was purposeful. I made myself a cup of cinnamon tea, the steam curling up like an exhale I had been holding for days. Then I sat at the dining table and spread out the papers Mr. Hammond had asked me to bring. The deed, bank statements, Henry's old notes. The marigolds outside glowed under a muted, overcast sky, their warm petals looking almost defiant. The doorbell rang. It was a delivery man holding a medium-sized package wrapped in brown paper. He asked for Sophie. I signed for it, placed it on the console table, and stared at it for a while. It felt heavy, heavier than a simple package should. I didn't open it. I had no right to, and besides, I didn't want more answers that hurt. But I thought about it more than I should have. I went upstairs next, to the small room where Henry had kept his drafting desk. I rarely entered it now, not because it was forbidden territory, but because the air always smelled faintly of cedar and pencil shavings, and that scent could unravel me instantly. The afternoon light filtered in at an angle, illuminating dust particles floating like tiny worlds. On the shelf above his desk, the velvet box that once held Henry's watch should have been placed. For years it had sat there untouched, but I had moved it to my bedside drawer after he died. I thought having it close would comfort me. Now even its absence weighed on me. I sat at the desk and opened the notebook Henry had last written in. The page was filled with measurements, sketches, and a note scribbled in the corner. "If anything happens to me, Maria will know what to do." I didn't feel like I knew anything. Not yet. When I went back downstairs, I noticed something under the console table, a thin strip of paper curled like a ribbon. I bent to pick it up. It was a torn piece of Sophie's handwriting. "Ask Daniel if Maria would actually sign. If not, we push for the smaller place. She can't live alone forever. I stood there with the paper between my fingers. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. It was almost eerie how calm I felt, as if the storm inside me had finally lined up into something focused. I slipped the torn note into my box of reminders. Later in the afternoon, while tidying Daniel and Sophie's room, a habit I had tried to break but never fully succeeded, I found something else. A small leather pouch, half unzipped, lying beneath a pile of Sophie's scarves. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, not new, not expensive, but familiar. It was my mother's. She had given it to me when I turned 27, telling me, "Wear this when you need to remember who you are." I had not seen it in months. The bracelet, the watch, the haircut, the notes, the receipts, all of it formed a pattern I could no longer pretend wasn't there. Sophie and Daniel were not simply careless. They were not merely entitled. They were making space for themselves in my life by slowly erasing pieces of me. I placed the bracelet back in the pouch, set it on my dresser, and looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was short now, uneven but softened by Marta's careful hands. It framed my face differently. I didn't look like the Maria of last month, and part of me was grateful. Around 5 in the evening, the clouds outside darkened. A light rain began, tapping softly against the windows. I made myself a bowl of tomato soup, sprinkled with a little basil from Henry's old herb patch. I sat alone at the table, listening to the quiet hum of rain and the occasional creak of the house settling. It was during that stillness that a thought came to me, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet truth rising from deep within. This house is mine, my memories are mine, and I have the right to protect them. At 7, the front door opened. Daniel and Sophie came in carrying shopping bags, 2 each. Sophie dropped hers onto the couch and sighed loudly. "Maria, can you put these away? I'm exhausted." I didn't move from my seat. Daniel noticed immediately. "Mum, everything okay?" I looked at him and saw traces of the little boy who used to run through the house laughing, his curls bouncing, his cheeks flushed from play. But that boy was buried under layers of dependence, excuses, and unspoken resentment. "Yes," I said, "everything is fine." Sophie walked into the dining room, glanced at my soup and frowned. "You didn't make anything for us?" I shook my head. I wasn't hungry enough to cook a full meal. "So we have to figure out dinner ourselves," she said, offended. "You're capable," I replied. Daniel looked from me to Sophie, confused. "Mum, is that about the hair? Seriously, we've moved past that." I stood slowly. "I don't think we have." Sophie rolled her eyes. "Maria, you're being ridiculous. Maybe I was. Or maybe this was the first moment in a long time where I wasn't." I walked past them to my room and closed the door gently. Not a slam, not a statement, just a quiet boundary. I sat on my bed, took a deep breath, and dialed Mr. Hammond. "Everything still set for tomorrow?" I asked. His voice was steady. "Yes, Maria. I'll be there at 10 sharp." When I hung up, I felt something settle inside me, something that had been shifting for days. The rain outside softened into a mist. The house grew quiet, and I realized the breaking point had passed. What came next wouldn't be breaking, it would be rebuilding. Friday arrived with a cold, pale blue sky, the kind of morning light that makes everything look slightly washed out, as if the world hasn't fully woken up yet. I rose earlier than usual. My body felt heavy, but my mind was clear in a way I hadn't felt in years. I showered, letting the warm water run over my uneven hair, and chose a simple charcoal grey sweater and deep green slacks. They weren't new, but they made me feel grounded. I tied a thin scarf around my neck, a faded red one Henry bought me from a street market or one of our anniversary trips. I always forget which year. I only remember how gently he wrapped it around me. I walked into the kitchen and made myself a cup of black tea with a slice of orange. No breakfast. My stomach was too knotted for food. The marigolds outside were still wet from the night's rain. Drops clung to their petals like clear beads. At 9:40, I slipped on my coat, picked up my folder of documents, and left before Daniel or Sophie came downstairs. I didn't want to answer questions. I didn't want to pretend. Mr. Hammond's office was in a beige building with wide glass doors downtown. The hallway smelt faintly of lemon polish and old carpet. His secretary greeted me with a warm smile and led me to his office. "Maria," Mr. Hammond said, rising from behind his wooden desk. "I'm glad you came in. Sit, please." His grey suit was slightly wrinkled, his silver glasses reflecting the morning light. He was older than Henry had been when he passed, but there was something reassuring in his steadiness. "You brought everything?" he asked. I handed him the folder. All of it. He opened the deed first, nodding, then the bank summaries, then the handwritten notes I had copied from Henry's letters. Finally, the page with the partial handwriting Sophie had left under the console. When he finished reviewing it, he placed his glasses on the desk and leaned back. "Maria, this is serious. I know. What they've done, cutting your hair, entering your room without permission, spending on your credit card, discussing matter-of-factly using your home as leverage, none of it is acceptable. And the missing watch." He paused. "Do you believe Sophie took it?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm not sure if Daniel knows." His sigh was long, heavy. "You have every legal right to remove them from the home. You're under no obligation to continue supporting them financially either." We went over every detail: eviction procedures, timelines, what I was allowed to do, what I should avoid doing, how to protect myself in the process. When he placed the eviction notices in front of me for signing, my hand briefly trembled, not out of fear, but out of the weight of finality. "Maria," he said gently, "this isn't punishment. This is a boundary long overdue." I nodded and signed. Then he slid over the form to cancel the monthly transfers. I signed that too. Our meeting lasted almost an hour. When I walked back out into the hallway, the world felt sharper, clearer, like I could finally see through fog I didn't know had been covering everything. I stopped at a small cafe on the corner. The windows were fogged from the warmth inside. I ordered a chia latte and a cinnamon pastry. I don't know why I hadn't eaten breakfast, and my hands were cold. I sat near the window and watched people rushing across the crosswalks, coats buttoned tight, scarves flying like flags behind them. Everyone looked like they were heading somewhere important. Where was I heading? Back home, back to confrontation, back to a truth that had been quietly waiting for years. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Daniel. "Morning, Mom. Any chance you can pick up some groceries today? Sophie wants to make pasta tonight." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling nothing and everything at the same time. I didn't reply. I finished my pastry in small bites, letting the cinnamon sit on my tongue, letting the warmth soothe the space between my ribs. When I arrived home around noon, the house was silent. Daniel and Sophie were gone again. Their shoes were missing from the entryway. A half-empty coffee mug sat on the counter. I placed my folder gently on the dining table. At 2 o'clock, I walked through the house one last time before what was coming. I touched the edge of the staircase where Daniel had once placed stickers of cartoon animals when he was 5. I ran my hand across the dining table Henry had sanded by hand the year we moved in. I straightened a slightly crooked picture frame of a beach trip we'd taken when Daniel was 10. His cheeks sunburnt, Henry's arm around both of her. So much history. So much love. So much I had allowed to erode. At 3 o'clock, the door opened. Daniel and Sophie walked in carrying shopping bags and a box of pastries. "Maria." Sophie said brightly. We brought you something. Almond croissants. Your favorite. My favorite? I hadn't eaten almond croissants in years. Henry used to love them, not me. Daniel kissed my cheek. Mom, I got great news! Remember that business idea I mentioned? My friend thinks he can bring me in as a partial partner if we can get the initial investment. It's only about $800. Only. 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 That word had become his whole vocabulary. I felt a slow, quiet shift inside me, the final piece falling into place. That sounds interesting, I said. It is, he said eagerly. We can talk more tonight. Sophie wants to show you some renovation ideas for the house too. Maybe this place could really turn into something modern. Modern. As if the home Henry built was a relic, as if I was a relic. I smiled gently. We'll talk tomorrow. They blinked, surprised. Tomorrow? Why tomorrow? Their questions hovered in their expressions, but they didn't voice them. I went upstairs, leaving them to unpack. My steps were calm, my breath steady. The decision had been made. Tomorrow, at 10 o'clock, Mr. Hammond would arrive. Tomorrow, the truth would land. Tomorrow, the house would breathe again. And so would I. Saturday morning arrived with a brisk chill that clung to the windows like faint frost. I woke before the alarm, before the house stirred, before the birds outside warmed their voices. The quiet was thick but not oppressive, more like the kind of stillness that comes right before an orchestra lifts its instruments. I stepped into the hallway and could hear only the hum of the heater. Daniel and Sophie were still asleep, or at least in their room. The door was shut and no light slipped from underneath. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of mint tea with a drizzle of honey. Not the honey Sophie always used, but a small jar I kept tucked away in the back of the cabinet, a habit I formed sometime after Henry passed. A small, strange piece of myself I never shared. By 9:45 I had dressed, a soft navy cardigan, dark slacks, hair pinned loosely with one of the simple clips I used before Sophie started commenting on my old-fashioned style. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror for almost a full minute. I didn't look strong. I didn't look fierce. I looked prepared. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. The sound didn't echo, it landed. I opened the door. Mr. Hammond stood outside, wearing a charcoal coat and holding a slim leather briefcase. His expression was calm, solemn, respectful. Maria, he said, nodding. Shall we? Yes. Please come in. As he stepped inside, Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs, hair mussed, shirt wrinkled, a confused expression tightening his brow. Mum? Who's that? Sophie emerged behind him, tying her robe, her face puffed slightly from sleep. Maria, what's going on? She asked, suspicion already creeping into her voice. I gestured toward the living room. Let's sit. Daniel came down the stairs slowly. He glanced between me and Mr. Hammond, growing more tense with each step. Once they were seated on the couch, Mr. Hammond took a seat across from them. I sat beside him, hands folded neatly in my lap. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Mrs. Sophie, Mr. Hammond said politely. Good morning, Daniel replied, his confusion sharpening. Are you Dad's lawyer? Yes, Mr. Hammond said. I handled Henry's estate, and I am here today on behalf of your mother. Sophie crossed her arms tightly. For what reason? Mr. Hammond opened his briefcase and removed 2 neatly prepared envelopes. These are for both of you. Daniel took his slowly. Sophie snatched hers quickly, ripping it open. Her eyes skimmed the page, once, twice, and then her face drained of color. You're evicting us? She stammered. Maria, what is this? What are you doing? Daniel's hands shook as he read, his jaw tightening. Mom, why is this that we have to leave in 30 days? This has to be some kind of mistake. There is no mistake, Mr. Hammond said firmly. Your mother has the legal right to ask you to vacate the property. There is no lease, no rental agreement, and you have not contributed financially to the home. Sophie shot up from the couch. No lease? We've lived here almost 2 years. That gives us rights. Mr. Hammond's voice remained steady. Not legal rights. You are considered guests. Guests can be asked to leave at any time, provided they are given a formal notice period. You have been given 30 days. Daniel looked at me, eyes wide with something between disbelief and hurt. Mum, is that really what you want? I took a breath. Yes. But why? His voice cracked slightly. We're family. I swallowed. Family doesn't take advantage of each other, Daniel. Sophie scoffed loudly. Oh, please. Advantage? What advantage? We've been helping around the house. No, I said quietly. You've been using the house. Using me? Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Is that about the haircut? Sophie apologized. No, I didn't, Sophie snapped. Daniel glared at her. Well, you should now, because this is ridiculous. I kept my gaze steady. It's not the haircut. Then what? Daniel asked, his voice rising. I looked at him softly. The spending on the emergency card, the notes about the house, the conversations about renovations, the missing bracelet, the missing watch. At that, Sophie's face flickered. Daniel frowned. Watch? What watch? My father's watch, I said, the one Henry left me. Daniel froze. It's missing? Yes. Sophie looked away. My chest tightened. Daniel, did you know? He stared at Sophie, searching her face for answers. Sophie? What is she talking about? She didn't speak. Silence can sometimes be louder than confession. Mr. Hammond cleared his throat and continued. In addition to the eviction notice, Mrs. Lane has also cancelled the monthly transfer she had been sending you. Daniel's head snapped toward me. You cancelled the money? Mom, how are we supposed to live? I'm still between jobs. We rely on that money. I know, I said gently. That's part of the problem. Sophie's composure cracked. This is unbelievable. We have nothing saved. We were counting on that money. You were counting on me, I corrected softly. Sophie rolled her eyes. Same thing. No. My voice was stronger now. Not the same thing. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. Mum, we can talk about this. Can't you reconsider? Please? I've spent months talking, I said. Nothing changed. And kicking us out will? He asked bitterly. I don't know, I admitted. But staying like this, it was breaking something inside me. Sophie stood abruptly. No, we're not doing this. Daniel, say something. She can't do this. She's losing it. Mr. Hammond stood as well, unbothered. Mrs. Sophie, I assure you she is well within her rights, and if you refuse to leave at the end of 30 days, legal action will follow. Daniel's eyes brimmed. Anger, confusion, fear, all mixed in a way that made my heart ache. Mum, he whispered, why now? Because I had reached the point where staying silent was more painful than speaking. Because Henry's watch was missing. Because my hair had been cut. Because the home I built was no longer mine. Because I was disappearing. But I didn't say all that. I simply answered, because I need my home back. And I need myself back. Daniel looked away, jaw tight. Sophie glared daggers at me, breathing hard. This isn't over, she hissed. Perhaps not, I said gently. But it starts here. Mr. Hammond closed his briefcase. I'll be in touch if anything further is needed. Maria, call me any time. When he left, the house felt different. Lighter, not yet, but open. Air moved differently. My breath landed deeper. Daniel retreated to their room. I heard him close the door softly. Not a slam, not a shout, just a quiet surrender. Sophie left shortly afterward, slamming the front door so hard the picture frames rattled. I stood alone in the living room, listening to the echo fade. And for the first time in a long time, the silence did not feel like absence. It felt like possibility. The hours after the eviction notices felt strangely suspended, as though time itself had paused inside the house. The walls didn't echo with voices. No footsteps thudded across the floors. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded softer, as if the house understood that something irreversible had happened within its walls. Daniel stayed in the bedroom he shared with Sophie, the door shut but not locked. I didn't hear crying and movement, just an occasional shift of weight on the bed, a soft sound that pierced me more deeply than shouting ever could. I went to my own room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pale blue curtains swaying slightly in a draught. My hands rested on my lap, still and folded, yet inside them I felt a quiet tremor, the aftershock of a decision that had taken far too long to make. For the first time in months, I felt my heart beat clearly, not frantic, not weak, just present. But the calm didn't last. Later that afternoon, while I organized some old documents in the hallway drawer, I found another piece of something I hadn't expected to see. A yellow sticky note, folded in half. I opened it carefully. It was Sophie's handwriting again, the same looping curves I had begun recognizing too well. If Maria doesn't agree, pressure Daniel, he can convince her eventually. Below it, not worth waiting. We need to move quickly before she changes anything legally. The words were like a cold hand closing around my spine. Not only were they planning the house's future without me, they were strategizing how to wear me down. I placed the note in my box of reminders, the box that was slowly filling with pieces of truth I had ignored for far too long. Around 5, I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat in the backyard for a while. The marigolds swayed gently in the cool breeze, their bright petals stark against the shadowed lawn. I ran my fingers over one of the leaves, remembering how Henry once leaned down beside me to plant the very first marigold patch. "You always choose the warm colors," he'd said, brushing soil from my cheek, "even when you feel cold inside." Maybe that had been true all along. When the sun dipped lower, the back door swung open softly. Roberta stepped out, unannounced as always, holding a thermos and a small paper bag. "Your lights were still off," she said, setting everything on the small patio table. "I figured you either needed company or a very long nap." I exhaled, a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Company. She handed me a warm cup of cinnamon coffee and sat beside me. Roberta had the kind of presence that didn't intrude. She simply filled the empty air with something gentle and human. "I told you yesterday," she said softly, "when you make choices like that, the guilt always arrives before the peace. But the peace will come. Trust me, I know," I whispered. "Or I'm trying to know." She watched my face carefully. "What happened?" I told her everything, the eviction, the cancelled transfers, the missing watch, the notes. She listened quietly, nodding, not interrupting, not judging. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine. "Maria, listen to me." Her voice was firmer than usual. "You've spent years giving and giving. You poured yourself so thin you could barely feel your own edges. What you did today, it was not cruelty. It was reclamation." "I feel like I hurt him," I said. "I feel like a bad mother." Bad mothers don't protect their children forever. They raise adults. And sometimes raising an adult means letting them fall. Her words sank into the evening air, steady and certain. We stayed outside until the sun slipped beneath the rooftops and the sky grew a soft lavender. When Roberta finally left, she squeezed my shoulder and said, "Call me if the quiet feels too big tonight." Quiet did feel big, but not empty. Later, when I went upstairs to get my shawl from Daniel and Sophie's closet, a habit I learned after Sophie kept borrowing things without asking, I noticed something odd. A piece of white paper sticking out from Sophie's jewelry drawer. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Inside the drawer was a small stack of torn notebook pages. The top one caught my breath. Tell Daniel it's Maria's turn to take responsibility. She'll cave, she always does. Another, Daniel can't handle pressure, use that. And at the very bottom, once we secure the house plan, we can decide what to do with her room, my room. The place where Henry and I used to talk late into the night, where Daniel had once curled beside me as a child after waking from nightmares, where I had cried after Henry died, holding the watch that was now missing. A tremor moved through me, not anger, not fear, clarity. I placed the pages back exactly where I found them, closed the drawer quietly, and stood in the middle of the room. The air felt heavier, still, as if the house itself had heard something it could never forget. When I returned to my room, I sat on the bed again, feeling the weight of what I had discovered. Daniel had been manipulated, but he had also allowed himself to be manipulated, and I had allowed them both to take pieces of my life because I thought love meant endurance. I pressed a hand to my heart. Henry, I whispered into the dimness, I hope I'm doing that right. The room didn't answer, but the silence no longer frightened me. I turned off the lamp, pulled the blanket over my shoulders, and closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come easily, but when it finally arrived, it settled like a beginning, not an ending. And I woke on Sunday morning with something I hadn't felt in months. Resolve. Sunday morning arrived pale and cool, with a thin veil of fog hanging over the backyard. The marigolds were bowed slightly, the petals heavy with dew, as though even they understood that the air in the house had shifted. I moved slowly through the kitchen, making myself a cup of warm lemon water instead of tea, letting the quiet settle against my skin. Daniel did not come downstairs. Sophie's bedroom door stayed shut. The house felt heavier than the day before, but in a different way. Not the weight of dread, but the strange gravity of change. Around 10, Daniel finally emerged. His eyes were swollen, his hair uncombed. He held his phone in his hand like it was something fragile he didn't know what to do with. "Mum," he said, voice rough, "can we talk?" I nodded and motioned for him to sit at the dining table. He didn't sit. He paced, running a hand through his hair over and over. "Sophie's with her sister," he said. "She left early this morning." I waited. "She's furious. She thinks you're overreacting." He swallowed hard. "She thinks you're doing that to punish us." "And you?" I asked quietly. He stopped pacing and looked at me, not with anger this time, but with something rawer. Something like fear. "I don't know what to think," he whispered. "I don't understand why you're doing this." I folded my hands on the table. "Daniel, when was the last time you worked a full-time job?" His jaw tensed. "Mum, when was the last time you paid for your own groceries? Or your own clothes? When was the last time you made a decision without asking me for money first?" He sat then, slowly, as if the weight of my words made his legs weak. He placed his phone face down on the table. "I'm trying," he said softly. "You make it sound like I never tried." "I know you've tried," I replied. "But I also know I made it too easy for you not to keep trying." He blinked at that, a small flicker of truth sinking in. The moment held still between us. Then his phone buzzed. Daniel didn't look at it, but I saw the message appear across the screen before it dimmed again. "Sophie, tell her she ruined our lives. Don't let her guilt you." Daniel flipped the phone over quickly, but he knew I'd seen it. He slumped forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I don't know what to do," he said. I don't know how to live without all the help. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. You learn, I said gently, the same way all adults learn. You take one step, then another. You fall, you get up. You build your own life. He didn't cry, but he didn't breathe easily either. And then, abruptly, he stood. I'm going to take a walk, he said, reaching for his coat. I just need air. Daniel, I said softly, don't go far. He nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Hours passed. The house was too quiet. At 2:30, the phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I answered, expecting perhaps a telemarketer or one of Roberta's friends, but the voice on the other end was urgent. Is this Mrs. Maria Lane? Yes, speaking. This is Officer Ramirez from the Midtown Precinct. Your son, Daniel Lane. He listed you as his emergency contact. My stomach dropped. What happened? He was involved in a minor traffic incident on Maple and 8th. He isn't seriously injured, but he appears shaken and disoriented. We'd like someone to come pick him up, if possible. I didn't remember hanging up. I didn't remember grabbing my coat. I only remembered the cold air slapping my face as I rushed outside and the blur of buildings as the rideshare sped through the city. When I reached the intersection, a police cruiser was parked near the curb. A dented silver sedan sat crookedly beside a yellow-painted fire hydrant, hazard lights blinking. Daniel was sitting on the curb, head bowed, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. A scrape along his right cheek glowed pink against his pale skin. I rushed to him. Daniel, I breathed, are you hurt? He looked up at me, and the expression on his face was not pain, it was defeat. Mum, he whispered, voice trembling. I fell asleep. I didn't even see the light change. An officer walked over. Mum, he's okay, no major injuries. The other driver wasn't harmed, but he shouldn't be driving in this condition. He admitted he hasn't slept properly in days. I turned to Daniel, heart tightening. Why haven't you been sleeping? His shoulders shook. Because everything is falling apart. Sophie left. You're kicking us out. I don't have a job. I don't have money. And now I don't even... His voice cracked. He covered his face with both hands. And then, finally, the tears came. I knelt down beside him, despite the cold pavement biting into my knees. Daniel, I whispered, pulling his hands gently away from his face. Look at me. He did, eyes red, expression broken. You are not falling apart, I said softly. You are finally seeing the truth. That's painful, but it is not the end. He shook his head. I don't know how to fix anything. You start small, I said. You start with trying, and you start with honesty. His breathing slowed. I'm scared, he whispered. I know, I replied, but fear means you're finally facing life, not running from it. I helped him stand, thanked the officers, and led him toward the car. During the ride home, he stared out the window in silence. At one point, he lifted his hand to wipe his cheek, then lowered it again, fingers trembling. When we stepped inside the house, he paused at the threshold as though unsure whether he still belonged there. You do, I said quietly, for now. He nodded, his shoulders slumping. Then something shifted in his expression, a new weight, a new awareness. Mum, he began, voice unsteady. I need to tell you something. I waited. I think she's been taking things more than just the card. She always told me it was nothing, that you wouldn't notice. And he swallowed. I believed her. My heart cracked, softly and painfully. But this was truth. Honest, whispered truth. We'll figure it out, I said, squeezing his arm gently. One step at a time. He nodded again. And then, as if the confession had drained what little strength he had left, he whispered, Mom, am I a terrible person? The question pierced me. No, I said firmly. You are a person who forgot how to stand, and now you're learning again. Outside, the last strip of daylight was fading into a muted violet. Inside, the house felt different. Still heavy, still uncertain, but holding a new kind of quiet. A quiet with room for rebuilding. A quiet with room for truth. A quiet that felt in some small way like the beginning of healing. And as I guided Daniel toward the kitchen to get him water, I realized something with clear, startling certainty. This was the first day in a long time where I did not feel alone. The days following Daniel's accident settled into a quiet rhythm, not peaceful, not quite stable, but calmer than the chaos before it. There was a softness in Daniel's movements now, a subdued awareness that hadn't been there before. He walked slower, spoke quieter, listened more. Sophie didn't return that Sunday, or Monday, or Tuesday. Daniel barely touched his phone. I cooked simple meals, vegetable soups, soft rice with herbs, toasted bread, and placed bowls in front of him without comment. He ate without complaint. No entitlement, no careless remarks, just quiet gratitude. It was strange seeing that in him after so long. On Wednesday morning, while I watered the marigolds, I heard the front door open. Daniel stepped outside, wrapped in a thick brown jacket, the scrape on his cheek healing into a faint pink line. "Mom," he said gently, "can we talk?" I nodded, wiping my hands on my sleeves. We sat on the small bench under the marigold arch, the one Henry built with leftover wood from the kitchen remodel. The bench creaked softly beneath us. Daniel exhaled, his breath clouding faintly in the morning chill. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, "about everything. The accident, Sophie, you, me." His voice tightened on the last word. "I've been angry for so long," he said quietly. "Angry at jobs that didn't work out, angry at the world, angry at myself, and I didn't know what to do with that anger. So I hid from it, I numbed it, I pretended it wasn't there, and when Sophie pushed me, I let her lead because I didn't want to face my own failures. I didn't speak, I let him continue. She told me if we got the house in our name, we could take out a loan and start over, build something bigger. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't stop her. I didn't stop myself either." His voice cracked. "I'm ashamed, Mom. Don't jot of what I did, but of who I let myself become." I placed a hand over his. "Shame can be a beginning," I said softly, "if you let it teach you." He looked down, eyes glass. "I want to fix this," he whispered. "I want to fix myself, but I don't know where to start." "Start with honesty," I said, "with work, with accountability, with choosing better every day, even if it's hard." He nodded. "And start with letting go of people who don't help you grow." His eyes shifted, a flicker of pain. "Sophie called yesterday," he admitted. "She said she needed money. She said if I loved her, I'd help her. She said you'd understand if I asked." I waited. He shook his head slowly. I told her no. The word seemed to surprise even him. "No?" I repeated softly. He released a shaky exhale. "Mum, I felt something I've never felt before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear. It was strength, a strange kind of strength. Like I finally understood what you've been trying to teach me." My chest tightened. I told her no, he whispered again, firmer this time. And I felt free. A small, steady warmth spread through me, not pride, not triumph, but relief. We stayed outside until the breeze grew too cold, talking in fragments, letting the silence hold the rest. The following week was a beginning. On Monday, Daniel woke early and sat at the dining table with a notebook. "Mum," he said, tapping the pen against the paper, "can we make a plan?" "A plan for what?" I asked. "For my life." There was something almost childlike in his sincerity, the same earnestness he had at 8 years old when he asked Henry to teach him how to fix a lamp. We spent an hour writing down goals, find a stable job, save enough for 2 months of rent, pay for his own groceries, attend therapy to work through dependency and fear, build discipline. He added one more: earn back Mum's trust. I didn't cry, but something deep inside me softened. On Tuesday, he went to his first job interview in months, not for a corporate role or a managerial position he wasn't ready for, but for a warehouse coordinator job that required reliability, physical effort, and attention to detail. On Wednesday, he got the job. When he came home holding the offer letter, his smile was small, almost fragile, but real. "Mum," he said, breathless, "I did it." "You did," I replied, placing my hand on his cheek. "You truly did." He changed, slowly but steadily. He woke early every morning, ate breakfast without complaining, went to work dressed neatly, came back tired but satisfied. His posture improved, his voice steadied, he stopped asking for money. He even learned to cook simple meals for himself: rice, eggs, sautéed vegetables. For the first time in years, I saw the man he could have always been. 2 weeks after Daniel started his job, Sophie returned. Not dramatically, not with apologies. She showed up on a Thursday afternoon when I was trimming the marigold stems. Her makeup was smudged, her hair pulled into a hasty ponytail. She hugged her coat tightly around her. "Maria," she said, voice trembling, "can we talk?" I stood still. "About what?" She swallowed hard. I'm not doing well. My sister's tired of me. I don't have money. I don't have anything." Her eyes darted to the house. "To Daniel?" I asked gently. She nodded. "He won't answer my calls." "For now," I said softly, "that's his choice." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I know I made mistakes. I know I pushed too hard. I know I hurt you. But I didn't. I didn't think it would all fall apart." I looked at her, really looked. I saw a woman shaped by insecurity, fear, and the belief that control equaled worth, and for a moment I felt a quiet sadness. But sadness is not permission. "Sophie," I said, "you're young enough to rebuild your life, but you need to do it without leaning on others to carry your weight." She wiped her cheeks. "Can I see Daniel?" "Not today," I replied gently. "Give him time to grow without your influence. Give yourself time too." She nodded slowly, defeated, and walked away, her steps soft on the pavement. I didn't watch her leave. I turned back to the marigolds, trimming what had wilted so the new blooms could breathe. The next month, Daniel moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment near his job. Clean walls, small kitchen, thin carpet. But it was his. I helped him pack, labeling boxes, folding clothes, setting aside unused items for donation. We worked quietly, side by side. Before leaving, he hugged me tightly. "Mum," he whispered, voice cracking, "thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it." "You're growing," I said. "I'm proud of you." He wiped his eyes. "I want to make you proud every day." "You already have." And for the first time in a long time, that was the truth. The marigolds outside were blooming brighter than they had in years, and inside me, something else was blooming too, slow, steady, rooted. A quiet hope, a new beginning, a version of life I thought I had forgotten how to imagine. And as I stood alone in my kitchen, breathing in the scent of mint and warm tea, I realized that healing, real healing, is not loud. It happens quietly, breath by breath, moment by moment, and sometimes it begins the moment we stop trying to hold everything together. Sometimes it begins when we finally let go. Section 10. A full year has passed since that foggy Wednesday afternoon, the one that split my life into a before and an after. A year since I woke to hair scattered across my pillow. A year since I found the watch missing. A year since the house I'd built with Henry stopped feeling like home. Now, on a soft, amber-toned morning in early autumn, I sit in the backyard with a cup of lavender tea and watch sunlight ripple across the marigolds. They've grown taller this year, richer in colour, as if they've been waiting for me to finally breathe again. The house behind me is quieter now, but not empty, just calmer, balanced, mine. I lean back into the wooden bench Henry built and let the warmth settle into my bones. I'm 57 now. I don't feel younger, but I feel lighter. My hair, once uneven and hacked apart, now falls just past my shoulders in soft layers. It frames my face differently. Somehow, it feels like an introduction to who I became this year, not a reminder of who I used to be. I trace one strand between my fingers and think, this is mine. Not because it grew back, but because I reclaimed it. Around noon, Daniel arrives. Not late, not rushing, not calling from the car asking if I need anything. He simply shows up, holding a paper bag that smells like fresh pastries. "Mom," he calls, stepping into the backyard. "Are you out here?" I smile. "I'm here." When he sees me, his face breaks into that soft grin I thought I'd lost forever. He looks so different now, not in the way he dresses or talks, but in the way he stands. Upright, steady, present. The faint scar on his cheek has faded into barely a memory, but the accident changed him in ways deeper than any mark on the skin. "How was work this week?" I ask as he takes a seat beside me. He opens the bag and hands me a warm pastry. "Good. Tiring, but good. We got a new shipment and I trained the newer guys. They listen to me now. It feels nice." Pride flickers in his voice, small, cautious, but real. "I'm glad," I say, and I mean it. He takes a sip of the iced coffee he brought for himself. We also had a meeting with the coordinator from another warehouse. She asked if I'd be interested in a shift supervisor position in a few months. My heart lifts, subtle and warm. "Daniel, that's wonderful." He shrugs, trying not to smile too widely. "I'm not getting excited yet, but it feels good to be asked, you know?" "I do," I say softly, and I truly do. After lunch, we sit under the marigold arch just like we did months ago. Only now the weight between us has shifted, from burden to ease, from tension to understanding. "Mum," he says suddenly, using that softer tone he once reserved for late-night confessions, "I want to tell you something." I tilt my head. "Go on." His fingers drum lightly on his knee. "I've been going to therapy." I blink. He continues, "Twice a week. At first, I hated it. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to face anything. But it's helping me understand why I always felt like I was failing, why I kept depending on everyone around me, why I let Sophie push me into doing things I knew weren't right." A quiet breeze lifts a few petals from the marigolds, sending them drifting across the grass. "I'm proud of you," I say. He breathes out, relieved. "I want to do better. I want to be the kind of man Dad would have been proud of, and the kind of son you deserve." My eyes sting, just a little. "You already are," I whisper. He nods, swallowing. Then he adds, "There's more." I raise an eyebrow playfully. "Oh?" He laughs under his breath. "I met someone. Her name's Grace. She works in accounting at the warehouse. She's quiet, smart, independent. She doesn't need saving, and she doesn't want to save me either." "That sounds healthy," I say. He nods, almost shy. "I think so too. We've gone out a few times, but I'm taking it slow. I don't want to repeat old patterns." I take his hand gently. "Taking it slow is good. Growing is good." He squeezes my hand back. "I want you to meet her. Soon. When I'm sure I'm ready to bring someone into my life the right way." "I'd love that," I say, warmth blooming through me. In the late afternoon, after Daniel leaves, I go upstairs to dust the bedroom, the room that once felt like a battleground but now feels like a retreat. I open the drawer where Henry's old letters rest. I haven't read them in months, not because I avoid them, but because I no longer feel lost without them. But today, I take out the last one, the one he wrote weeks before he died, the one I hadn't had the courage to read fully until this year. The paper has softened at the corners, the ink is slightly faded. I unfold it gently. Maria, my love, if you ever feel the world asking more of you than you can give, remember that. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to keep pieces of yourself untouched by anyone else's demands. You have spent your whole life giving, to your parents, to me, to Daniel. But giving is not the same as disappearing. Promise me you will keep becoming, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. If Daniel ever forgets who he is, remind him gently. But do not shrink so he can grow. Both of you can grow at the same time. The house is yours, the memories are yours, the strength is yours. Do not let anyone make you believe otherwise. Love always, Henry. I hold the letter against my chest, breathing in the faint scent of old paper and ink. I'm still becoming, I whisper, feeling Henry's presence in the stillness. Just like you wanted. A tear slips down my cheek, not from grief, but from gratitude. In the evening, Roberta arrives with a basket of fresh bread and a grin. Ready for Arizona again next spring, she asks, stepping into the kitchen. I laugh. Already planning? Always, she says, placing the basket on the counter. Life is too short not to plan joy. She takes 2 mugs from my cabinet and pours herbal tea into each. You seem lighter, she says, studying my face. Like someone opened a window inside you. I think I opened it myself, I reply. She smiles. Good. You deserved that breeze. When she leaves and the house goes quiet again, I go to my writing desk. A blank notebook lies there, the ot I started months ago, filled with reflections I was too afraid to voice before. Tonight, I open to a new page and I begin to write. To any woman reading this, if you are exhausted, if you are invisible, if someone is slowly taking pieces of your life while calling it love, you are allowed to reclaim yourself. You are allowed to draw a line. You are allowed to start over, even at 57, even at 70, even at any age. You are not hard to love. You simply forgot that you matter too. I spent years disappearing. And then, in 9 painful moments, I began to return to myself. I hope you return to yourself too. I set down the pen, close the notebook, turn off the lamp. I walk into the backyard and more time before bed. The sky is deep blue now, scattered with early stars. The marigolds glow softly under the porch light. I breathe in the cool evening air. I feel whole, not because everything is perfect, not because the past is erased, not because pain disappeared, but because I finally remembered the truth Henry tried to leave me with. My place is not where others put me. My place is where I choose to stand. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, I stand exactly where I belong.